They said divorce always leaves scars, but Adrian believes some endings could be written without bitterness. He never expected his life would turn into a story that people would question, whisper about, or even judge from afar. Imagine this: a man in his mid-30s, a father of three, suddenly asked to release the very person he had built a family with. Yet instead of slamming doors and shattering plates, he chose silence, respect, and the heavy dignity of letting go. If you are listening now, don't scroll away, because what Adrian lived through is not just a story of separation. It is about love, identity, and the complicated shape of family. Stay with Heart Story until the end, because the truth that will be revealed later might change the way you see what family really means. 9 years before, Lucy sat across from Adrian with trembling hands. She did not ask for more money or for revenge. She asked for freedom. She told him she was a lesbian and that pretending any longer would suffocate her. Adrian listened, and though his heart cracked, he understood. He was 35, a white man who had built his life on responsibility, on schedules and children's bedtime routines, not on drama. He looked at Lucy and saw the mother of his 2 teenage daughters and their younger son. He chose not to hate her. Instead, he signed the papers and promised himself he would never use the children as weapons. In the months that followed, silence filled spaces that used to echo with shared laughter. Adrian was now a single father, trying to keep a balance between his work and the moments when the kids stayed with him. He carried their school bags, fixed their lunches, and reminded them that their mother's truth was not a betrayal, but a step toward honesty. He refused to paint Lucy as a villain, even when friends told him he had every right to be angry. He believed that dignity was the only gift he could still give his children. Time passed, and with it came an unexpected light. Adrian met Julian, an architect who lived openly as a gay man, never hiding, never apologizing. Julian was gentle where Adrian was steady, creative where Adrian was structured. Together, they built a home not on shame, but on transparency and care. Eventually, they married legally, and their love gave way to new beginnings: 2 more children, a toddler girl and a baby boy. It was not the life Adrian once imagined, but it was real, and it was whole. Yet just when stability seemed possible, an invisible storm began to gather. Lucy confessed to Adrian that she still carried feelings not for him, but for Julian, the man who had become Adrian's husband. It was a confession that did not come with hope, but with a shadow. The moment those words slipped from her mouth, the already fragile cooperation between them began to splinter. Every arrangement for the children became tense. Every plan Adrian suggested seemed to bruise Lucy in ways she could not name. She watched the man she once married living in happiness beside someone she secretly desired, and it twisted their co-parenting into a battlefield of unspoken jealousy. Adrian felt the ground shift beneath him. He had promised himself to never let anger guide him. But Lucy's confession was not something he could simply ignore. It was not hatred he felt, but a slow tightening in his chest each time he had to negotiate weekends, holidays, and birthdays. The children stood in the middle, pulled between parents who were supposed to protect them. And that is where the true conflict began, not in court documents or financial arguments, but in the silent war of time and presence. Adrian wanted to believe he could navigate it, but deep down he knew something had cracked. What began as a divorce without hatred was slowly turning into a struggle that would test the meaning of family itself. When he lay awake at night, listening to the faint breath of his baby in the next room, Adrian wondered if peace was possible when old feelings lingered like ghosts. He had chosen respect once, but now, respect alone might not be enough. Because sometimes, love does not end when a marriage does. And sometimes, the hardest lesson for any parent is realizing that protecting their children's hearts means facing truths they never wanted to confront. If you are moved by Adrian's journey, don't forget to follow Heart Story. More parts of this story are coming, and each one will take you deeper into the fragile but powerful bonds of family. Adrian believed that careful planning could hold a fractured family together. He knew the schedules by heart: when the twins had exams, when his youngest son had soccer practice, when Lucy usually called to check on homework. That is why he thought his request was reasonable. He asked if the children could come with him and Julian on a trip to Europe, not for pleasure alone, but because Julian's mother was ill and needed care. It would give the older children a chance to connect with their younger half-siblings, to see their father's new life not as a replacement, but as an extension of love. Lucy refused. She spoke of school calendars, of the importance of routine, but Adrian could hear the sharp edge beneath her words. It was not about math tests or attendance. It was about jealousy, about the fear that her children would grow attached to Julian in ways she could not control. She blocked every compromise, turning simple logistics into emotional warfare. The children did not see the full picture. To them, it appeared their father was choosing his new family over them. Each conversation with Adrian became heavier. The twins folded their arms, speaking less and less, their eyes clouded with resentment. His youngest son, still too small to carry the weight of adult conflicts, absorbed the tension most painfully. One evening, when Adrian gathered them at the kitchen table, the boy's words cut deeper than anything Lucy had ever said. His voice trembled as he asked, "Do you still love us? Or do you only love your new family now?" The question landed like a stone in Adrian's chest. He tried to answer, but his throat tightened. For years, he had believed his actions spoke clearly enough that caring for his children, showing up when allowed, and refusing to argue in front of them would prove his love. Yet in that moment, he realized silence was no shield. They needed reassurance spoken aloud, and they needed it desperately. Adrian tried to explain that he had asked their mother for permission, that he wanted them with him, that nothing in his heart had changed, but doubt had already been planted. The children shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding his gaze, others staring at him as if measuring the truth of his words against the stories their mother whispered. That night, Adrian could not sleep. He kept seeing his son's tear-streaked face, kept hearing the question echo through the quiet of his house. The pain was not only that his child had doubted him, but that Lucy had positioned him as the enemy. She had taken what should have been a conversation between parents and turned it into a battle fought through the fragile hearts of their children. The trip to Europe slipped away, replaced by weeks of icy silence. Adrian carried the weight of rejection every time he dropped the children back at Lucy's house. He noticed how they hesitated at the door, as if stepping between two worlds they did not know how to reconcile. And in those moments, he felt the edges of his patience fray. Still, he did not lash out at Lucy. He wrote her emails, each word carefully chosen, pleading for cooperation. He reminded her that the children were not possessions to be guarded or trophies to be won. They were human beings in need of stability, of shared affection, of parents who could set aside their differences. But Lucy never budged. The more Adrian tried to bridge the gap, the more she seemed determined to widen it, and Adrian began to understand that this was not a passing conflict. It was the beginning of a deeper war. The question that had spilled from his son's lips would not leave him. It forced Adrian to see that children are not just shaped by love, but by the perception of love. A father's heart can be full, but if his children believe it is divided, the wound becomes real. And sometimes the most dangerous lie is not spoken in anger, but whispered in the silences between two parents who refuse to trust each other. Adrian had always believed the truth could steady any storm. After hearing his son's painful question, he decided it was time to be honest, even if honesty risked further cracks. The next time his children asked why the trip had never happened, he told them directly it was not because he had chosen anyone over them, but because their mother had refused permission. He spoke calmly, without anger, but his words carried weight. The truth did not pass unnoticed. Soon after, Adrian's phone lit up with Lucy's number. Her voice came sharp and furious through the speaker, accusing him of turning the children against her, of poisoning their trust. He did not raise his own voice. He only reminded her that silence had already done enough harm, and that the children deserved clarity. But Lucy heard only betrayal. What she had once hidden behind excuses was now exposed, and it fueled her anger more than ever. For the children, the revelation became a quiet shift. The twins, who had begun to doubt their father, started watching their mother more closely. They noticed her subtle comments, the way she suggested that Adrian's new family left little room for them. They pieced together moments, whispers, and sighs until the pattern became undeniable. Eventually, they found their way back to Adrian on their own, asking in hushed tones if it was true that their mother had blocked the trip. They confessed that she often told them he would forget them, that his loyalty now belonged elsewhere. It was not said with malice, but with the confusion of teenagers caught in a storm they did not create. Adrian listened, heart heavy. He wanted to comfort them, to erase the damage, but he knew some wounds were too deep for simple reassurances. It was Julian, ever the steady hand, who suggested a different path. "They need someone outside of us," Julian said. "Someone who can help them see this isn't their fault. Otherwise, these scars won't fade." His words carried the weight of wisdom born from his own life, years of carrying silence, years of learning that unresolved pain can echo for decades. The idea of involving a therapist felt, at first, like surrender. Adrian had hoped to manage everything with patience and careful choices, but now, in gloom, staring at his children's weary expressions, he realized love alone was not enough. They needed tools, not just affection. They needed a safe space where their voices could be heard without being trapped between parents at war. The decision settled heavily in Adrian's chest, but he knew Julian was right. If he did nothing, the children would learn to equate family with conflict, love with abandonment, and honesty with betrayal. He could not allow that cycle to take root. Meanwhile, Lucy's anger burned hotter. Each exchange with Adrian grew shorter, more clipped, as though she believed admitting fault would erase her authority as a mother. She clung to control, even at the cost of her children's peace. She did not yet see that every wall she built to keep Julian out was only teaching the children how to question her. Adrian saw it clearly. They were reaching a dangerous precipice. Either the cycle of mistrust would harden, or it could be interrupted by a choice to seek help. It was no longer just about schedules or trips abroad. It was about whether his children would learn to carry pain in silence or learn that love, when guided carefully, can survive fractures. In those quiet evenings, as the house settled into stillness and his two youngest slept peacefully, Adrian would sit with Julian and wonder how much damage had already been done. He feared that no matter what he did, the older children might always remember these years as a time when loyalty felt uncertain. Yet even in fear, he chose movement over stillness. To seek help was not weakness, it was love refusing to let silence win. And perhaps that was the deeper lesson hidden beneath the arguments and accusations. Children are not shaped solely by what parents say, but by how parents choose to handle their failures. Honesty may wound in the short term, but denial leaves scars that last. In the end, a parent's strength is not measured by control, but by the courage to admit when the weight is too heavy to carry alone. The struggle between Adrian and Lucy no longer hid behind small disagreements. It emerged openly, woven into every decision about their children. What had once been subtle resistance turned into strategies sharpened by jealousy. Lucy made her move not with words or schedules, but with something far more powerful to her children, 3 small kittens. She knew that Adrian and Julian, already caring for 2 little ones, could not manage pets on top of their busy lives. She brought the animals into her home, presenting them to the children as a gift of love. The children's delight was instant. They cradled the kittens, their laughter filling Lucy's house with joy. She had calculated the outcome carefully. When the time came for them to spend days with Adrian, he would be forced into an impossible position. Either he accepted the cats, stretching his household beyond capacity, or he sent them away and faced his children's heartbreak. The moment arrived sooner than expected. Adrian explained gently that with a toddler and a baby, it was not safe or practical to bring the kittens into their home. He found families willing to adopt, people who could provide care. He thought the children might understand, but instead their faces hardened. To them, it looked like rejection, a choice against their happiness. They accused him of caring less, of not wanting the things that mattered to them. The sting of their words cut deeper than Lucy's anger ever had. For weeks, Adrian carried the weight of their resentment. The twins avoided his questions, offering curt replies, and his son withdrew into silence. Even when he tried to explain the reasoning, they heard only absence, only loss. The bond between father and children, once wounded but resilient, now felt dangerously thin. Julian tried to reassure him. "They'll see the truth one day," he said, placing a hand on Adrian's shoulder. "But right now, all they feel is the loss." And Lucy knew that. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried concern. He understood how easily children could be pulled into emotional traps, because he had once lived in a home where adults used silence and guilt as weapons. The tension pushed Adrian to a place he had avoided for years, the thought of revisiting custody. He had always resisted involving the courts again, believing cooperation was the healthier path. But as he watched his children's trust fracture under Lucy's manipulations, his resolve began to shift. This was no longer about personal pride. It was about whether the children were growing up in an environment that nurtured their well-being, or one that taught them to weaponize affection. The idea of petitioning the court weighed on him. It meant opening old wounds, risking more bitterness, perhaps even losing ground. But he could not ignore the harm. Each time he looked at his youngest son, he remembered the tears that came with the question about love. Each time the twins pulled away, he felt the cost of silence. And each time Lucy struck another blow disguised as kindness, he realized he could no longer shield his children with patience alone. Adrian began to research, to speak quietly with lawyers, to consider what it would mean to request a review of custody agreements. He did not want to strip Lucy of her rights. He wanted fairness, a balance where the children could live without manipulation, without being forced to believe that one parent's love required rejecting the other's. It was the most difficult decision of his life, because it asked him to place his children in the center of legal battles he had sworn to avoid. But sometimes choosing peace at all costs is not true peace, it is surrender. And surrender was something he could no longer allow, not when the stakes were the hearts of his children. In those long nights of deliberation, Adrian began to understand a deeper truth. Love, if it is to survive conflict, cannot be passive. It must be active, protective, willing to step into discomfort or for the sake of what is right. Parents often believe sacrifice means silence, but sometimes the greatest sacrifice is the courage to fight not for oneself, but for the fragile trust of a child who deserves to grow in safety, not in shadows. The air inside the courthouse felt heavy, as though every whisper carried the weight of years unspoken. Adrian sat at the long wooden table, his hands clasped tightly, while Julian remained beside him, steady as always. Across from them, Lucy looked composed on the surface, yet her eyes betrayed a storm. This was not just about custody, not only about schedules and holidays. Something deeper hung between them, something neither had ever dared to voice in front of strangers. The mediator asked simple questions, the kind meant to ease both parties into discussion. But soon, words grew sharper, and tension filled the room. Adrian spoke calmly of the children's confusion, of how small acts like the kittens had turned their affection into a battleground. Lucy bristled, her voice rising, accusing him of twisting reality. For a moment, the room seemed caught in the endless cycle of blame. Then, as if the weight became too much to bear, Lucy's voice cracked. She leaned forward, her composure collapsing, and confessed what had been haunting her all along. She admitted that her anger had never been about schedules or travel, not even about Julian alone. It was about her own heart. She confessed that a part of her had never stopped loving Adrian, and seeing him find happiness with another man had ignited something she could not control. Jealousy, regret, and longing tangled inside her, twisting every choice she made. The children, who had been invited to witness part of the session for transparency, sat frozen. For the first time, they understood the truth of her father had not abandoned them, and their mother's actions were not about them at all. It was not rejection by Adrian, but Lucy's inability to let go of what once was. Silence filled the room until Julian rose to speak. His words did not carry judgment, only compassion. He suggested that Lucy did not need to be excluded from family moments. She could still join certain trips, certain gatherings, so the children would not feel forced to choose sides. It was not a surrender of boundaries, but an act of grace, a recognition that the children's needs must come before adult pride. In that moment, something shifted. Adrian signed the revised agreement with firm resolve, Lucy with reluctant acceptance, and Julian with quiet strength. They were not repairing a marriage, but they were building something different, an expanded form of family, where love for the children rose above resentment. The lesson was clear: family does not need to fit a mold to be whole. It requires humility, the courage to face uncomfortable truths, and the willingness to place children above wounded egos. Adrian left the courthouse that day knowing the road ahead would still hold challenges, but also that they had taken the first real step toward peace. And perhaps that is what defines family: not perfection, but the decision to love in ways that protect rather than divide. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in Adrian's place, would you have taken Lucy back into shared family moments? Or would you have drawn a line forever? Comment below with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Heart Stories for more powerful stories like this. Tales of love, betrayal, resilience, and the unexpected ways family is redefined. Your support keeps these stories alive. So hit subscribe, like, and share this journey with others who believe in the strength of truth and love.